There we go. Sorry, guys, I was muted that whole time. So unmute for something special, which is reading the English translation of the first invocation verse. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Awesome. Okay, on to verse 33. Arjuna said, O Madhusudana, O Madhusudana, O Madhusudan, the system of yoga which you have summarized appears impractical and unendurable to me, for the mind is restless and unsteady. So Arjuna's response here is quite natural and still totally relevant to readers today. The only thing which is not relevant is that Arjuna is being far more eloquent and articulate than the average person today. But the thought, the idea that he's expressing here is exactly what so many of us are thinking as we're reading this right now. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada says Arjuna is talking about the system of mysticism described by Lord Krishna, beginning with the words Shuko, Shucho, Deshe, and ending with Yogi Paramaha. So I looked it up, and that's referring to chapter 6, verses 11 up to chapter 6, verse 32, the end of the previous verse, verse 32. Now, the main reason Arjuna is talking about his difficulty here is that the mind is restless, which is absolutely true for 99% of all humans of all times. Unless you've already, gone through an extensive yoga, kung fu type practice, the mind is certainly restless and unsteady. In fact, even if you do go through one of those difficult trainings, it depends what training you do. Sometimes, like what I do is detachment. So my mind is just as restless now as it was when I was 10 years ago or something. But I just don't let it get to me. I practice I'm just detaching from whatever's happening in the mind. So it's not affecting me as much. But it's still totally crazy, restless, unsteady, totally. But yeah, there are other trainings where you can literally make it less restless and more controlled. And that's very difficult. That's what Krishna was talking about here for quite about 20 verses or so, 21 verses exactly. And Arjuna's like, no, this is impractical. And also another keyword, unendurable, means even if Arjuna is saying, even if I can do it for a little bit, am I able to keep doing it consistently for months and years, which is required to get good at this? No, it's unendurable. So that's my take on this, is that Arjuna is talking about just the nature of things. But Prabhupada first begins by mentioning the practical aspect of leaving home and going to a secluded place in the mountains or jungles. And yes, that's another thing that Arjuna is probably referring to, which is not practical for people in this age. For the vast majority of people, it's simply impractical. I read a devotee post on Facebook the other day, just yesterday, as I was reading this, the same day I saw a relevant post that they were like, "Oh, well, I'm in the Ukraine or something," and So those kind of forests, are very difficult to live in, as opposed to if you're in a tropical jungle area in India or Thailand or whatever. It's a lot easier to just go to the forest and live there because there's banana trees, mango trees, and it's just a lot more opulent with food sources. Of course, there's also more tigers and more predators too. But anyway, just an interesting thing. And then the main point in the purport, which is obviously true, this is just one few sentences or a paragraph after how it's impractical to go to the mountains or jungles, is that whatever ability we have to do this kind of thing, this system of yoga 5,000 years ago when Arjuna was talking, it was much easier to do that than it is today. And on top of that, Arjuna, in his particular individual circumstances, had an even better than average chance to do this for most people at that time. He was royalty. He was a skilled warrior. He was an advanced person. And Prabhupada said there's no historical record of his practicing it at any time, this system of yoga. And in the final sentence, Prabhupada says why yoga schools of today are simply wasting their time. I'll read the last two sentences. Those who are imitating this yoga system in different so-called schools and societies, although complacent, are certainly wasting their time. They are completely in ignorance of the desired goal. How about some light? Let's shine some light in here. Okay, verse 34. This is still Arjuna talking. For the mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it is, it seems to me, more difficult than controlling the wind. Once again, very practical, relevant. Arjuna is saying what so many of us would say today, although, yes, once again, the particular prose, language style, the voice is far more formal and eloquent and articulate than many of us would say, especially with the very practical, nature-based analogy of controlling the wind. I don't know anyone who would use that analogy today, but that doesn't mean it's not true or not relevant or not a good analogy. It's a great analogy. And that will come into play later as well. In the purport, we find the verse in Sanskrit that corresponds to one of the plates in the Gita. The individual is in fact a passenger in this material body, not even the driver. So I'll just read this Sanskrit verse in English, just the English translation. It just says in the Vedic literatures. Unfortunately, it doesn't say where. I wish we could have that more often in this Gita, but definitely not fault finding Prabhupada for that. It's in this case, one reason it's really not needed is because we have a beautiful picture for it as well. And the English is so explicit and clear. I mean, honestly, who cares? You know how to say it in Sanskrit. You have a great translation in English, and you have a picture for it. Do we need to know, this chapter, this verse of this Purana or whatever? We don't really need to know that. If we're following Prabhupada sincerely, nicely, humbly, that's actually the least important part of all the other things I mentioned. So, quote, the individual is the passenger in the car of the material body, and intelligence is the driver. Mind is the driving instrument, i.e. the reins, and the senses are the horses. The self is thus the enjoyer or sufferer in the association of the mind and senses. So it is understood by great thinkers, unquote. All right, now I'm going to see if I can find that plate, that picture. I hope it's in this Gita. Yep, there it is. Many of you have already read this, are certainly familiar with this beautiful picture, which is talking about this verse exactly. Now, in the plate, it says this is spoken of on page 343. Yes. So 343, that's actually the verse. That's this verse 34, what Arjuna is saying. And then in the purport, Prabhupada gives us the exact verse where we get this picture of the horses and so on. Fantastic. Very practical. It's not just an analogy, it's a visualization technique. When you actually see yourself in as the lady in this picture with the horses, just like, what's going on? You're actually seeing the truth. It's something to meditate on. That's why another reason why this Bhagavad Gita is so excellent, because the pictures are very practical yoga tools. So like for me, I was able to become vegetarian easily because of the one picture of the man with the cow face killing the cow with the human face. And it says like, those who kill animals will be reborn as animals, something like that. It's such a well done picture, which literally kind of scares you. It's dark and gruesome, and it's like when you accept the truth in it starts to work inside of you. But of course, it will take bravery to actually look at this truth dead on, face on. The end of the purport is nice. This is one of the few places we see where Prabhupada explicitly mentions Lord Chaitanya. So how do we control the mind? Quote, the easiest way to control the mind, as suggested by Lord Chaitanya, is chanting Hare Krishna, the great mantra for deliverance, in all humility. Unquote. So once again, another great writing style of Prabhupada is, he does the same kind of word plays that Krishna does with Sanskrit. Prabhupada does in English. So the great mantra for deliverance, mantra is in italics. So that indicates Prabhupada means this is a Sanskrit word. I'm not translating it to English. I'm just writing down the original Sanskrit word as it is, just with English letters. Mantra. But everything else is not italic. So great, if you're reading this and you don't get it, great, you may just think Prabhupada means, it's pretty good, man. This is a pretty cool mantra, bro. But no, he's obviously referring to those who are in the know of Maha Mantra. This Hare Krishna mantra is literally called Maha Mantra, which literally translates to great mantra. But he could have written it differently. He could have wrote great mantra in single quotes, and that would have been perhaps more accurate, more academically, scholarly or something. But it's far better this way because it's an inside joke, not joke, but it's a hidden reference for those of us who are who are in the know and can look deeper. We can go, I see what you're doing there. And it creates a personal connection, which is really nice. Continuing on from Prabhupada, quote, the method prescribed as Savai Manaha Krishna Padaravindayo. One must engage one's mind fully in Krishna. Only then will there remain no other engagements to agitate the mind. Unquote. Verse 35. The blessed Lord said, O mighty armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by constant practice and by detachment. Krishna once again responds in the standard way of any excellent teacher. It's very important that this is one reason I'm doing this live stream. You're getting this from me that you won't get from most other people. And one reason you don't get it from other people because so many devotees are scared to be offensive, which I don't want to belittle. Like, it is a big, you really don't want to offend a devotee. A proper Vaishnav, you don't want to offend them. But coming from the place where, yeah, Krishna is God, he's the greatest of the great. But at the same time, he's a person, and when he's on the battlefield speaking to Arjuna, this is a human to human personal conversation. And so there are rules to that. So when you're in a teacher-student dynamic, there are simply a set of rules and natural structure, natural law determining what is an excellent conversation and what is a non-excellent conversation according to that frame, according to the psychology and culture and so on of these circumstances. And so still today, it works to be a teacher in the same way Krishna is being a teacher. This is just a very mundanely correct, excellent, virtuous way to speak as a teacher to a student. What is Krishna doing? He begins, first of all, by agreeing, or more like validating, the experience of the student. Oh, yes, my son, my student, you're right. Yes, it is certainly very difficult. That's very important. It tells the student, like, I know I'm not a tyrant. I'm not just like commanding you to do something that, is way too difficult and I'm not going to do it myself. Ha, 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 ha. Look at you struggling. Ha, ha, ha. No, the first thing when the student has trouble is validating their trouble. Yes, that's a valid concern you have, although not always. But in this case, yes, Arjuna has a very valid concern that he's bringing up to Krishna. And that's the first thing Krishna, as a good teacher, says to Arjuna. Yes, it's very difficult. Yes, you're right. But after that, he, with no stubbornness and no tyranny, assures Arjuna, that the instructions still stand. This is what a bona fide teacher does. Not just an excellent teacher, but a bona fide teacher is always giving proper instructions. So a bona fide teacher will never, almost never, or maybe never, rescind their instruction. Oh, I actually didn't mean that. I meant something else. That's not very bona fide or excellent, right? So right after saying, oh, okay, yes, it's so difficult, that's unfortunate, Krishna says, no, actually, yeah, but it works. This path is true and it does work, but yes, it's very difficult. And the Sanskrit word for detachment Prabhupada uses, or Krishna uses, is vairagyena, vairagya. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions how, there's different ways to do this kind of spiritual detachment, basically personal or impersonal. The impersonal vairagya is more difficult than the personal kind. The personal kind is very simple and very effective. You simply associate with Krishna and his devotees. You do that more and more, you'll naturally get a positive taste for it because it's a positive experience. It's full of bliss and love and mercy and glory, whatever. Not glory, maybe. Glory for him should be, but bliss for sure, mercy for sure, love for sure, knowledge, truth for sure. And perhaps we should remind you that When we talk about Krishna and his devotees, we're talking about the real Krishna and his real devotees, not the fake Krishna, not the fake devotees, which are there. I'm not saying there's a fake Krishna, but I mean, there is a manifestation or expression or stories told about Krishna that are false, that are misleading, that are not bona fide. And those, we're not talking about those. If you associate with the fake ones more and more, you will not have an easy time. You will not get a positive taste for it that will quickly, get you in a state of vairagya. No, you may suffer. Or worse, you may get attracted and think you're advancing and becoming a devotee and having states of bliss, but they're not real bliss. It's just pleasure, material pleasure, but you think it's bliss. That's a horrible state to be in. That's very hard to extricate someone from that kind of ignorance, which is one reason why I've happily left Western ISKCON geographically, because there's so many devotees like that. Even in Hindu, the Indian bodied devotees, they're lost. They don't actually have real bhakti, but they think they do. That's a horrible kind of ignorance. Horrible, not for them, horrible for me. Horrible. It's so difficult to wake someone from that kind of slumber. It's just like, it's a huge headache. It's so difficult. I'd rather just run away, to be honest. Doesn't mean I'm not a devotee anymore. It just means I'm hanging out with devotees over here in the East instead. And even when I'm not with devotees, well, I'm still in the East, where Varnashram, Samanya Dharma, these things are still being practiced. Maybe not in Korea, but even in communist China, they have more Varnashram there than most other countries in the world, more than India. Pretty sure. It's definitely what it feels like. Okay, 36. And once again, this is still Krishna speaking. For one whose mind is unbridled, self-realization is difficult work. But he whose mind is controlled and who strives by right means is assured of success. That is my opinion. Yes. So I'm looking at the word-for-word translation now. Opinion, that's a literal translation from Prabhupada. Once again, this is standard excellence in education, pedagogy that Krishna is doing here. A tyrannical teacher will say, no, this is the truth and just follow it or go away. But what Krishna does is he's giving the absolute truth, but he's saying, well, it's my opinion. So you're free to reject it. I want you to have that space to be voluntary, to be free to take it or leave it, to, be in a clean state of mind when dealing with this work, as opposed to being in a state of fear or intimidation or shame. All of those different states of consciousness will contaminate the student. So they have less chance to really grapple with the subject matter as it is. So that's why Krishna is saying, this is my opinion. It's not his opinion. It's it's the absolute truth. But he's saying my opinion because he's a good teacher, a better teacher than me, I might add. Although I wonder what Krishna would do if he were in a similar situation in these times where everyone believes that, not everyone, but, I deliberately overcompensate the other way by not engaging in opinions at all, because that's what's destroying society. Is people think there is no truth. It's all just opinion, and that's just fundamentally wrong. So I deliberately live in the world of non-opinion and rational argument and so on, and I push it in people's faces too much on purpose. And I think there is justness in it, but yeah, I do it too much. And there are certainly sometimes I need to say, I need to do more what Krishna is doing here, especially actually, I don't have a problem with this. When it's my students, when it's my people, when it's people I love and care about, I'm pretty good at this actually. But for everyone else, note to self, note to others, I should do more of this, what Christians do. That is my opinion, free to accept or reject. That's fine. I hope I can be more like Krishna in this regard, a better teacher in this regard. Also, an important word is unbridled. And in the word for word translation, that's exactly what Prabhupada says, asamyata, unbridled. Asam means not some. Some means the same or connected with, right? Most likely. And also unbridled. What's a bridle? A bridle is the thing you put on a horse to control the horse and ride it. So that's Krishna's probably making a direct reference to that other verse in Vedic literature that Prabhupada quoted for us about the individual in the chariot with the 5 horses and so on. So there's so much to enjoy here. There's so many connections in this holographic text. Every Bible is holographic. In just one verse, you have the entire Bible. Some verses are better than others as far as that holographic nature goes, but it is quite holographic. Everything refers to everything else, and so on. Very small purport here. And what's the difference between this verse and the last verse? They're very similar. The only main difference is that Krishna is adding that one should strive by right means. So yes, it's difficult work. And yes, by constant practice, you can do it. And furthermore, to be assured of success, just do it the right way. That's the main thing added here. What is the wrong way? Well, Prabhupada mentions in the purport, yoga practice without mental control is a waste of time. It's a show of yoga practice, which may be materially lucrative, but it is useless. So that is the wrong way. To do really impressive yogic feats and get material wealth for that is not the right way. Okay, verse 37. Arjuna said, "What is the destination of the man of faith who does not persevere, who in the beginning takes to the process of self-realization, but who later desists due to worldly mindedness and thus does not attain perfection in mysticism?" Very significant verse. Also worth noting is that now we're in a dialogue. Now for a few verses here, we're going back and forth, teacher and student, Krishna and Arjuna, which is definitely fun. It brings, it's just fun. It just for the reader going through this, it makes it more readable. We're now in a far less dense kind of reading style. It's just more readable. But this is a very significant verse, not just because it generalizes. This verse is not just about this particular chapter 6 subject matter. This is about the entire process of yoga. This verse can apply to the entire thing. So it's very significant. And the question is quite simple, and now in this case, Arjuna is exemplifying the excellent student. Just before I talked about Krishna was exemplifying the excellent teacher. Now Arjuna is really being a great student here. He's saying it's another very valid concern. We've both agreed. Now Arjuna is saying, I've said it's difficult, teacher. You have agreed that it is very difficult. Furthermore, therefore, what if I give up? What if my friends give up? Other students on this path? What is to happen? What happens if we give up? you would agree that it's very difficult. So people may give up. So what happens? I need to know, like, how. I know it's important, but I believe you that you don't want me to be fearful, but I just need to know. I need to know how serious this is, how serious I need to be. I need to be prepared. This is a valid and excellent concern for a bona fide student. And Prabhupada uses the analogy of warfare in the purport to talk about someone who is on this path, the man of faith. That's what in the verse it says, the man of faith who does not persevere. But it also, we're talking about the path of self-realization, transcendence. There's many other synonyms we could use. But what Prabhupada says is that when you're a person on this path, what you're really doing is you're waging war on Maya. It's not, this is a subtle practice. It's not like basketball or painting or sculpting. You're not dealing with gross physical matter here. It's entirely subtle, 100% subtle. Your body may be, sitting a certain way or not sitting a certain way, but the actual practice, the actual content of study and practice is entirely subtle and metaphysical. That notwithstanding, what is the bhav? What is the ethos of this metaphysical work we are doing? Prabhupada says it's warfare. That's how serious it is, where if you lose, you die. If you win, you're victorious and you gain, territory and wives and loot, that there's the biggest stakes in warfare. And so when you wage war on Maya, what is she going to do? She's going to make moves. She's going to defend. She's going to want to keep her conquest. She's going to do things to, to make sure you stay on her side. Maybe you heard the bell ring. My food is here. And 2 more verses to go. Mostly Prabhupada just says, yes, it's true. There's so many different ways we can fail. And I think let's go to the next verse. I really want to hear the answer here. Oh, but we're not going to do that today because that's not until verse 40 or later. Anyway, verse 38. O mighty armed Krishna, does not such a man, being deviated from the path of transcendence, perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? Now, at first I thought in this verse, Arjuna is referring to the nature of this path and how it's all subtle, all metaphysical. And so the clouds are like that. They're just the most subtle things. It's all air, right? It's air in the sky. It's like the most subtle analogy we can use. And it's quite likely that Arjuna is referring to what he said before, that controlling the mind is more difficult than controlling the wind. I would bet that's what's happening here. But Prabhupada does a great job of explaining quite literally what a riven cloud is. Quote, a cloud in the sky sometimes deviates from a small cloud and joins a big one. But if it cannot join a big one, then it is blown away by the wind and becomes a non-entity in the vast sky. So what this means is that if you're going on the path of transcendence and renunciation and you fail, you're in a really bad place. Because you've already renounced all your material belongings most of the time. And so you can't have material happiness. And if you fail to transcendence, you don't have spiritual happiness either. So it seems like you have no position at all. That's exactly what Arjuna says. With no position in any sphere, you're completely lost. And little safety as well. Do we lose both ways? In the end, Prabhupada says, to reach this goal of life through Brahman and Paramatma realization takes many, many births. Bahunam Janmanam Ante. Therefore, the supermost of transcendental realization is Bhakti Yoga or Krishna consciousness, the direct method. Verse 39. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for yourself, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. So I haven't had a chance to compare this to the later edited Jai Israel Swami Gita version, but this verse particular may be actually a good example of how that later edited Gita is better than this version, because this style of English is pretty rare now. It's accurate, it's totally accurate and fine, but the phrase "but for yourself," if you're not reading it slowly, you may not catch what's going on. I didn't. When I read this yesterday, I didn't catch it. I was like, all I heard in my mind was, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Yourself can but why doesn't he just say you can destroy this doubt, or only you can destroy this doubt? That's how we'd say it in modern English, like only you can destroy this doubt, or nobody except you. That's a very common modern American international English way of saying it. But in Old English, it would be more common and more eloquent, more poetic to say, but for yourself, no one else can do this. Yeah, and there's no word else. You don't see else anywhere here. Else is, maybe the best word of accuracy to use, because computer programmers use it. If not this, else that. It's like a really old logic word. Anyway, that's just something to think about. Maybe later, I'll compare the verses. And yeah, once again, for reading this verse for me, this is another one of those examples where the word for word in Sanskrit is actually easier for me to understand than the English verse. For me, also this English verse is really small. It's only 2 small sentences, which is another reason that, we want to read it real slowly and carefully. There's only 2 commas, though. Anyway. In the beginning of the Gita, the Lord said that all living entities exist individually in the past, now in the present, and continue to retain their identity in the future, even after liberation from material entanglement. So, Krishna has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now, Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. And what Arjuna is saying here is that the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer to all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly. And not just for himself, but for all living beings. This is Krishna's knowledge. So Krishna and Krishna conscious devotees alone can know what is what, unquote. So that's it for our stream today. 42 minutes, not bad. Next time we'll continue on verse 40, and we'll hear Krishna's answer. What will happen? I'm excited. Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Jai Srila Prabhupada, glories to the Vaishnavas everywhere. See you later.